Right now, your company's cutting-edge AI-powered supply chain is probably being completely bottlenecked by, well, a piece of technology popularized back in 1993.
Yeah, the good old PDF attachment.
Exactly. The PDF. I mean, if you look at the architecture of modern enterprise, we have autonomous robots moving pallets in warehouses,
Yeah.
right? And we've got these incredible machine learning models predicting consumer demand down to the actual hour. Yet when it comes time to, actually bill someone or issue a purchase order, what do? We fire off an unstructured PDF via email.
Which basically just throws a massive wrench into the gears of all that expensive automation.
It really does. So, for today's deep dive, we are looking at a really fascinating stack of sources detailing how a European government mandate sort of accidentally created the permanent replacement for this entirely broken system.
Yeah, it's an emerging network called Peppol.
Peppol, which I have to say is kind of a funny name for something so massive. But our mission today isn't to just look at this as like another boring IT compliance hurdle. We want to understand the actual mechanics of what might literally be the most significant upgrade to global financial infrastructure in decades.
It really is a structural paradigm shift.
Duh.
And you're totally right to highlight the absurdity of the current state of things.
Yeah.
Because when you analyze the sources we're diving into today, the underlying theme is just that the B2B world has been, well, fundamentally constrained by its communication architecture.
Right.
We've been trying to force 21st century supply chain velocity through this heavily fragmented, like 1980s era framework.
Yeah, and I want to push on that fragmentation for a second, because anyone listening who works in enterprise IT or supply chain, they know we've had EDI, electronic data interchange, for decades now.
Oh, sure.
And we have massive value-added networks, those VANs, that process millions of transactions. So why exactly are the sources arguing that this legacy infrastructure is fundamentally broken? Because, I mean, we already transmit data electronically, right?
We do, yeah. But we do it bilaterally.
Yeah.
And that is the core vulnerability of the entire current system.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
So in the traditional EDI model, right, if your ERP system needs to talk to a supplier's ERP, you have to establish a dedicated bilateral technical agreement. You literally have to map your data fields to their data fields, test the connection, and then maintain it.
So even if we're both using the same standard, like Edifact or whatever.
Exactly. Even if you both use a standard, your specific implementation is going to be slightly unique.
Right, because like one company might use a specific field for a tracking number while another company just leaves that field totally blank and, I don't know, shoves the tracking number into the comments section.
That is exactly the problem. And
Yeah.
that means for every single trading partner, you are building and maintaining a custom proprietary bridge.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you are a global enterprise with, say, 10,000 suppliers, you are actively managing 10,000 distinct technical relationships. The cost and the friction of that are just astronomical. It completely bottlenecks scalability.
Okay, so that makes sense. It's just a maintenance nightmare.
Completely.
Yeah.
And this is where Peppol changes the underlying physics of the exchange. The sources compare it to the structural shift from closed private intranets to the public internet.
Oh, the email analogy. I love this part of the text. They basically say that Peppol functions like email, but for structured, legally valid commercial documents.
Right.
Which makes a lot of intuitive sense, Like, I don't need to go hire a developer to build a custom technical agreement with your email provider just to send you a message.
No, of course not.
I just need your email address, and the underlying protocols like SMTP just handle all the routing automatically.
That's exactly it.
But okay, how does that actually work for a complex financial document? Like, how does Peppol route a massive purchase order without a custom mapping agreement?
Right. So it operates on what's known as a four-corner model. You don't actually connect directly to your supplier at all. Instead, you connect to a certified Peppol access point. That's corner 1 to corner 2.
Okay, got it.
And then your supplier connects to their own chosen access point. That's corner 4 to corner 3.
Wait, so the actual magic happens between the two access points?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The Peppol network provides this decentralized directory structure. They use something called the Service Metadata Publisher, or SMP, and that's paired with a central locator.
Okay, that sounds a bit jargon heavy. What is that in plain English?
Think of it like a global DNS, but for B2B commerce.
Ah.
Yeah.
Huh?
So when you hit send on an invoice, your access point queries the network to find out, first, if the receiver actually exists on the network, and second, what specific document types they are capable of receiving.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. And once that's confirmed, it routes the document securely to their access point, utilizing fully standardized transport protocols.
Okay, so that drastically shifts the operational burden. You are basically moving the conversation from, hey, how do we map our complicated systems to this specific vendor, to simply, are they on the Peppol network?
Precisely. If they are on it, the routing is deterministic. It just works.
But I want to pivot here because I'm thinking about how this actually gained traction in the real world. Because networks like this, they always suffer from the classic chicken and egg problem.
Right. The empty network problem, yeah.
Exactly. Like a network is only valuable if everyone is already on it, but literally no one wants to join an empty network. So how did they pull this off? Because Peppol started as a European public procurement initiative, right? It was essentially just a way to standardize e-invoicing for governments in the EU.
Yeah, and that's actually the fascinating geopolitical angle here. The initial catalyst for all this wasn't like corporate efficiency or saving businesses money. It was government tax collection.
Wait, really? Tax collection?
Yeah, public sector efficiency. European governments were losing billions to what's called the VAT gap.
The VAT gap. Okay, what is that exactly?
It's the difference between the expected value-added tax revenue and the amount the government actually ends up collecting. To close that gap, they realized they needed continuous transaction controls. Basically, they needed to see the actual invoices as they were happening.
Oh, wow. So they just mandated it. Like if you want to sell laptops or whatever to the government, you have to send an electronic invoice through this specific Peppol network.
Correct, they forced the issue. But here is the really critical pivot. Because Peppol solved the interoperability problem so beautifully for public procurement, it just couldn't stay contained. The architecture was way too useful.
Yeah, and the sources show this incredibly rapid global expansion that goes way, way beyond Europe now. Like Singapore's Infocom Media Development Authority, they built their entire national e-invoicing framework right on top of Peppol.
They did, yeah.
And Australia and New Zealand adopted it as their standard. We're seeing active programs in Japan, Malaysia, and even pilot frameworks in the US through the Business Payments Coalition.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. It's governed by Open Peppol, which is a nonprofit, but it basically has the backing of sovereign nations globally at this point.
Which, brings up a really interesting tension. When you look at countries like Singapore or Japan adopting this, it's super easy for corporate leaders to view it somewhat cynically.
Right, like it's just a regulatory power grab, just governments trying to monitor all commerce.
Exactly. And while sure, regulatory visibility is definitely a factor for the governments, the technical reality presented in the sources is that these countries are adopting Peppol because building a proprietary national standard from scratch is just incredibly inefficient.
Why build it when you can just plug into it?
Exactly. They are leveraging an existing proven interoperability backbone.
But that government mandate aspect, that is exactly what is causing this massive blind spot for businesses right now. The sources are very explicit about what they call the compliance versus strategy trap.
Oh, this is such a huge issue.
Right. Because the CFO is being told, hey, we need to connect to this network because Germany or Singapore is mandating it for tax compliance. So the whole project just gets treated like, I don't know, a regulatory tax form.
Yeah, they view it entirely as a sunk cost rather than an operational upgrade. So the typical corporate response is to just build what the articles term a minimum viable connection.
Minimum viable connection.
Yeah, the IT team or the finance team is basically tasked with doing the absolute bare minimum to extract outbound invoices from their ERP and just push them into the Peppol network purely to avoid getting fined.
Right. It's a completely outbound-only mindset, which means they're leaving the most massive ROI completely on the table.
The real strategic value of the Peppol infrastructure is bidirectional, but specifically, the gold mine is in capturing the inbound document processing.
The inbound side. Okay.
Yeah. If you only build an outbound pipe to satisfy a government mandate, you are entirely missing the opportunity to revolutionize your own accounts payable department.
Let's get into the weeds on why that inbound pipe is so valuable. Because, look, I can hear a skeptical CIO listening to this right now thinking, okay, we've already spent millions on OCR pipelines and accounts payable automation. We've got fancy machine learning models extracting data from vendor PDFs. Why on earth do we need this network?
It's a fair question, but the answer is that OCR, no matter how advanced the machine learning model is, it remains fundamentally probabilistic.
Meaning it's just guessing.
Exactly. It is essentially your software making a highly educated guess about what a digital picture of a piece of paper says. It relies on coordinates, bounding boxes, historical templates,
Oh, I've seen this fail so many times.
right? Because the second a vendor changes their invoice layout even slightly, your OCR template completely breaks, the data degrades, and suddenly a human has to intervene to fix it
Which introduces latency, error, and, of course, cost into the supply chain.
completely. Peppol, conversely, provides deterministic data. The network mandates the use of highly structured semantic models. Specifically, they utilize formats like UBL, which is Universal Business Language, or UNC FACSLing 2.
And just to be clear for you listening, UBL isn't just a basic file format like a CSV or something. It's a very comprehensive XML-based library of business documents with incredibly strict semantic rules.
Yes, that is the critical distinction. It defines not just the syntax, but the actual semantics. It dictates exactly what a term like tax subtotal or buyer reference means structurally.
So there's no ambiguity at all.
None. When an inbound UBL invoice arrives via your Peppol access point, there is zero guessing. The data fields are rigidly defined. And furthermore, because it passes through the access point validation layers, you know for a fact that the document perfectly adheres to the required schema before it ever even touches your ERP.
Wow, so you are basically eliminating the entire data capture and validation phase of accounts payable. The document just arrives pre-validated and perfectly machine-readable.
You bypass the messy OCR pipeline entirely. And when you realize that every jurisdiction adopting Peppol mandates these same structured formats, you really start to see the compounding value.
Because you only have to do it once.
Exactly. If you build a deep bidirectional integration once, you are effectively future-proofing your ERP against all these global mandates.
That's a huge point. Like, if Australia introduces a new mandate tomorrow, you don't have to spin up a brand new multi-million-dollar IT project to build a custom Australian gateway. You just configure your existing Peppol architecture to handle the localized routing rules. The foundational integration is already there.
Right. The network investment is amortized across every current and future regulatory requirement. But, the sources push the implications of this deterministic data even further.
Yeah, this is my favorite part.
They argue that this shift away from probabilistic data capture is literally the absolute prerequisite for autonomous finance.
Yes, the Internet of Agents. This is where the strategy goes from just like saving some headcount in accounts payable to fundamentally altering how a company operates. Because everyone is incredibly hyped right now about autonomous AI agents, right? These systems that can execute multi-step workflows without any human intervention.
But the limitation of autonomous agents right now isn't the AI reasoning. It's the data environment they have to operate within.
Right.
Like an intelligent agent designed to manage working capital cannot reliably execute a three-way match between a purchase order, a goods receipt, and an invoice if the invoice data is trapped in an unstructured, unverified email attachment.
It's just going to break.
It will constantly halt and flag for human review because it simply cannot trust the inputs.
It's the old garbage in, garbage out principle, just scaled up by AI.
Exactly. Agents require an environment of absolute data certainty. They need unambiguous identifiers for the trading entities. They need standardized formats where the semantic meaning of every single field is legally defined. And they need cryptographically verified sender identities.
Which is exactly what Peppol provides.
Yes. Peppol basically acts as the translation layer that converts the messy, human-readable economy into a machine-trustable environment.
Let's map out what that actually looks like in practice so you can really picture it. Under this architecture, your ERP's AI agent could instantly receive a UBL invoice via Peppol. And because the data is deterministic, the agent can compare the invoice lines to the original purchase order lines in the ERP perfectly.
Right.
But if there is a quantity variance, it doesn't just like flag it for an accounts payable clerk to review on Monday morning.
No, because it's a bidirectional network. Your agent can instantly generate and route a standardized dispute message right back through the Peppol network, directly to the supplier's ERP agent.
That is just wild to think about.
And then the two systems negotiate the variance based on predefined business logic, they issue a structured credit note, and they schedule the payment. All that happens in milliseconds.
You are totally removing the human latency from the dispute resolution cycle.
Exactly.
And the network effect is undeniable here too. As more suppliers join Peppol, whether they are dragged in kicking and screaming by government mandates, or they actively choose to join for the efficiency, a larger percentage of your supply chain becomes instantly processable by these autonomous agents.
That is exactly why the sources stress the urgency here.
Yeah.
The organizations that treat this purely as an outbound compliance exercise, they're building a bridge to nowhere. they will wake up and find themselves competing against supply chains that operate with zero administrative friction.
Okay, so if the stakes are really this high and the difference between just doing compliance and actually having a strategy is this vast, how does an enterprise actually architect this integration? Because the sources are very clear that you can't just like plug a cable into your SAP or Oracle system and suddenly speak Peppol.
No, you definitely can't. The architectural decisions are crucial here. As we discussed earlier, the connection requires an access point. So organizations face a classic build versus buy decision. You can technically build your own access point, which requires becoming a certified provider through Open Peppol.
Which sounds like a massive technical debt trap, honestly, unless you're like a telecom or a massive logistics provider.
It really is. It requires rigorous technical certification. You have to pass strict conformance testing, and you have to maintain ongoing compliance with constantly updating protocols. For like 99% of enterprises, the only logical path is to partner with a certified third-party access point provider.
But here's where the trap lies again, right? If you just go out to RFP and pick the absolute cheapest third-party vendor who promises to, quote, get you compliant, you run the risk of buying a super shallow integration.
Yes, exactly.
You get a vendor who basically just acts as a glorified format converter, right? They're just scraping your ERP data and shoving it out the door. The sources emphasize that what you actually need is a canonical data model. Let's unpack that mechanism because it seems central to getting this right.
It absolutely is. A canonical data model acts as a sort of universal translator within your own enterprise architecture.
Yeah.
ERP systems, whether it's SAP, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics, they all have their own highly proprietary data structures.
Right.
If you build a direct point-to-point map from your specific SAP instance directly to the Peppol UBL format, that map is incredibly brittle.
Right, because if you upgrade your ERP next year or you acquire a company that's running a totally different system, the whole integration just breaks.
Exactly, it shatters. So instead, a mature integration utilizes a middleware layer.
Yeah.
Your various ERPs output their data into one unified master schema that's the canonical model.
Okay, I see.
And then the access point provider maps that single canonical model to the various Peppol localized formats and other global regulatory standards. It abstracts all that complexity completely away from your core ERP.
So your internal systems only ever have to speak one language. The middleware handles the translation to the rest of the world.
Exactly.
And that middleware has to handle complex document status management too, right? Like, it's not just fire and forget.
Oh, far from it.
Yeah.
When a document traverses the Peppol network, it generates standardized technical receipts. They're called message-level responses.
Message-level responses.
Yeah. It confirms delivery to the receiver's access point, and it can even confirm whether the receiver's actual ERP system accepted the business logic of the document. A truly strategic integration ensures those response codes are fed directly back into the ERP.
So the finance team has a real-time, legally auditable trail of exactly where a document is at any given moment. There is no more of that, hey, did you get our invoice email traffic?
The operational visibility is absolute. And, it extends way beyond just invoices. A proper architectural design supports the entire procure-to-pay cycle. We're talking orders, order responses, dispatch advices, invoices, and credit notes.
Wow. Okay, I want to touch on one more critical architectural component the sources highlight, and that's the trust framework. Because accounts payable fraud, specifically business email compromise, costs global enterprises billions every single year.
Oh, it's a massive problem.
Yeah. Hackers infiltrate an email thread. They send a spoofed PDF invoice with altered bank details, and the company unwittingly pays the fraudster. How does Peppol's infrastructure physically prevent that from happening?
It solves it through public key infrastructure, or PKI. You cannot just spin up a server in your basement and start sending invoices on Peppol. Every single access point operates using cryptographic certificates issued by the Open Peppol governing body.
So the network itself inherently enforces identity.
Exactly. When an inbound invoice arrives, the underlying protocol automatically validates the digital signature of the sending access point. And furthermore, the standardized formats carry rigid, verifiable company identifiers, like a registered VAT number or a standard company code.
So someone tries to fake it.
If a bad actor tries to inject a fraudulent document, the cryptographic handshake fails instantly, or the semantic validation rejects the unregistered identifier. The fraud is literally blocked at the network layer before it ever even enters your ERP workflow.
I mean, that alone basically justifies the ROI for most large enterprises right there. You are effectively outsourcing your identity verification to a cryptographically secure decentralized directory.
Yeah. When you combine that security with the deterministic data quality and the foundation for AI automation, it becomes painfully clear why this needs to be a board-level conversation.
Yeah.
Delegating Peppol integration to some siloed IT compliance team pretty much guarantees you will miss the strategic window.
So, to pull all these threads together for you listening, we are essentially watching the sunset of the bilateral, unstructured era of business communication. Peppol is fundamentally rewiring the basic physics of B2B exchange.
It really is.
By leveraging this decentralized four-corner model, enforcing strict semantic data structures, and securing everything with cryptographic trust, it is replacing the chaos of PDFs and custom EDI with a truly universal machine-readable language. And the governments that are mandating this for tax visibility, they have basically inadvertently handed the corporate world the exact infrastructure required for the autonomous, AI-driven future of finance.
Yeah, the network is identical for everyone. The competitive advantage lies entirely in how deeply you choose to integrate it into your own operations.
The window to build that advantage is open right now, while all your competitors are still treating it as just an annoying compliance tax. Which actually leaves me with a final, slightly provocative thought for you to mull over. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about the technical mechanisms of standardized data, right, and automated networks. But zoom out for a second. If Peppol succeeds in creating a global, instantaneous layer where machines trust each other's commercial documents perfectly, regardless of the origin country, what actually happens to the traditional borders of global trade?
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Think about it. The friction of international business has always been administrative. It's translating formats, verifying foreign entity identities, reconciling cross-border data structures. But when an autonomous agent in Chicago can instantly negotiate an invoice variance with an autonomous agent in Singapore with absolute cryptographic trust and zero human latency, does the very concept of international business just become, well, business?
Yeah.
When the administrative friction of commerce drops to absolute zero, how does the strategic landscape of your own industry change? It is definitely something to think about the next time you are forced to hit send on a PDF attachment.